Thank you. Thank you. I got it. All right. Don't worry, things are going to be just fine. Let me ask you, class of 2010, how's it feel? How's it feel? All right, now here's what I'd like you to do. Stand up, find the person in the audience who's responsible for all of this, or just think about the person who's responsible for getting you this far. Look at them, and let's give them a warm round of applause. Dean Shizer, distinguished faculty, proud parents, family members, friends, and most importantly, the class of 2010. Thank you for inviting me to share in this moment and to join you in celebrating all of your accomplishments that have been and most assuredly will be achieved. It's an honor to be back at Columbia Law School, although it's something of a miracle that I ever got into this esteemed school in the first place. Now, during my undergraduate years here in Morningside Heights, I was one of many students on this campus who felt strongly about, well, nearly everything during my time. It was the 1970s. During my senior year, several of us took over one of our concerns, that black students needed a designated space on campus to gather. And we went to the dean's office in that building right over there. Now, this being Columbia, we proceeded to occupy that office. The target of that sit-in was Dean Henry Coleman. He heard us out, he led us toward common ground, and eventually to a compromise. But I'm not sure that he was very happy about, shall we say, his forced captivity. In the ultimate display of chutzpah, however, I still asked Dean Coleman to recommend me for admission into this law school. And lo and behold, he agreed. Only at Columbia, my friends. That's one of the many reasons why I love this university. To return today as our nation's Attorney General to the place where I first studied the law, where I first dreamed of both serving the cause of justice and our country's Department of Justice, is an extraordinary privilege. I am proud to be part of this distinguished institution, and it is a part of me. And I am grateful to be among the first to welcome such a talented group of men and women into Columbia's law alumni faculty. Family. Oh, let's not get ahead of myself. Family. And today, as always, I'm just very glad to be home. I was born a few stops away from here in the Bronx. I grew up in Queens. I attended Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, and then, it's here for Stuyvesant. And then I spent 7 exhilarating years here at Columbia. It was across the street that I unraveled torts and studied for what seemed like months with Professor Reese, Paul's Graph versus Long Island Railroad Company. I still don't understand it. It was in the library that I discovered and hated contracts and grew fond of all-nighters. It was in the legendary Professor Telford Taylor's criminal law class that my interest in combating crime and my commitment to the rule of law was inspired. And it was during school summers that I had the opportunity to work for the NAACP on a few of the seminal discrimination cases of the day. This law school defined me in ways that I am still realizing. And I'm confident that in 35 years, you too will reflect and also realize that in important and unexpected ways, this university has influenced your work and has enriched your life. Now, of course, the law school has changed since I was here. There are more international students and offerings. There are a dozen or so journals instead of just 2. And what I hear about the construction of this 200 luxury on-campus dorm rooms, is that true? When we were college students here, President Obama and I were lucky to have hot running water. In the years since I received my diploma, I suppose I've changed too. According to an American Prospect article that was published earlier this year, and I quote, entered Columbia College in the fall of 1969, just in time to grow an afro and participate in some heated student protests, unquote. Well, something else has changed since 1976 when I was sitting in your seats watching, as Dean Shizer mentioned, then Attorney General Edward Levy receive an honorary degree. Since then, something more consequential than hairstyles and protest strategies has evolved, and that something is the law. Over the past 3.5 decades, our legal system has transformed in ways that, while easy to overlook or to take for granted, are critically important. Consider that when I first enrolled in this university, I could not vote, even though I was 18. I could, however, drink. It's true. Now, of course, the right to vote is afforded to every 18, 19, and 20-year-old. Or consider that recently, when I became Attorney General last February, there was not a single line in nearly 225 years of the United States Code that referred explicitly to gender identity. Today, the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Act, which the President signed into law last year, does just that, finally protecting our nation's gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered citizens from vicious hate crimes. Those are just two examples. In every field of the law, progress is being pursued and progress is being made. This is our nation's oldest and perhaps finest tradition. Since America's earliest days, young, dedicated lawyers have been using their knowledge and their training to stand up for justice, finding that their education not only armed them with an ability to change the law, it also provided them with the power to change the world. Our best example of this may be our earliest example, the development of our Constitution. Now, today it's worth remembering and mentioning that our Constitution was not created in a vacuum. It was, in fact, created to correct flaws in the legal framework that had been established by the Articles of Confederation. Now, don't worry, I'm not here to deliver a lecture on the law. I say that you've had your fair share of those. And trust me, over the past year, so have I. Instead, I'd like to offer you just the opposite, a slight but significant correction to the history that many of us grew up studying, the history of how our nation's most important founding document, our Constitution, was established. 223 years ago today, May 14th, 1787, a motion was made in Annapolis, Maryland, calling every state delegate to Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention. That summer, as the story goes, the wise old men of the Republic gathered to draft what would, despite its imperfections, become the greatest legal document in the history of mankind. Now, these framers rightly believed that the Constitution would provide a framework to extend their commitment to justice and opportunity for all. And as we have been taught, it was these elder statesmen who hoped it would serve as a shining example for all the world. The only trouble with this story is that it is not entirely accurate. Through some interesting research, two great historians, Stanley Elkins and Columbia's own Eric McKittrick, have provided a fuller picture. They have revealed that rather than being the product of venerable old sages, our Constitution was actually established at the insistence of and through the advocacy of young people, and specifically young lawyers. Those who supported the Constitution, the Federalists, were on average at least a decade younger than their opposition. Several leading Federalists were under 35, and more than a few of them were in their 20s. At 44, the oldest Federalist was George Washington, and many of his contemporaries, like Columbia University alum John Jay, hatched their ideas about a strong, democratic central government during their early years spent studying the law. Now, this history underscores a trend that we've seen time and time again in every chapter of America's story. Young people, it seems to me, are uniquely qualified to reimagine, and in doing so, to reinvigorate the law and the world. Many of the great social advancements in our nation's history were, in no small part, the result of ideas that law school graduates envisioned and, over time, implemented. This is evident whether you're looking at the eradication of slavery, the birth of the women's suffrage movement, and the passage of the 19th Amendment, or the passage of the 26th Amendment that ultimately enabled young people to participate in record numbers in the 2008 presidential election. And it is especially true when you examine the conception and creation of our civil rights laws. Several weeks ago, I traveled to Greensboro, North Carolina, to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Woolworth lunch counter sit-ins, a small student movement that quickly grew into a nationwide cause and over time inspired sweeping, positive national change. It motivated several Columbia Law students to take part in freedom rides across Mississippi. It paved the way for Martin Luther King's famous March on Washington in 1963, and it helped to spread the philosophy of nonviolent protest that advanced the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, and I'd argue eventually led to the election of the nation's first African-American president, as well as the appointment of its first African-American Attorney General. The exceptional commitment and capacity of young people, especially of those willing to devote their legal skills and training for the struggle for equal justice and for opportunity, always has been and will continue to be essential in moving our nation forward. Columbia Law School has a long tradition of graduating students unwilling to sit on the sidelines of history or miss an opportunity to work toward and fight for justice. Take Bella Abzug, class of 1947. After graduating from Columbia Law in her 20s, but before becoming one of the world's leading feminists, she took on civil rights cases in the South. Or take Judge Robert Carter, class of 1941. The master's thesis that he developed here eventually defined the NAACP's legal strategy in defending the right of freedom of association under the First Amendment. And I understand that one of our other famous alums, Theodore Roosevelt, was in such a rush to make an impact that after his first year on campus, he dropped out to pursue a life of public service. Think about what he might have accomplished if, like you, he had stayed here and graduated. Now, many of you will follow in this great tradition. In fact, some of you already are. Brittany Kirkpatrick began a new law journal that explores the intersection of race and law. Helping to chart the future of this still burgeoning field. Justin Steele is fusing his background in urban planning with his legal education to help determine the future of land use laws in a rapidly changing housing environment. And Janitra Supawang is helping to transform immigration and domestic violence law around the country. There are countless more examples in this sea of blue before me. Jennifer Sokoler's work on human rights, Sam Salganik's on healthcare, Emma Neff's on international reproductive rights. Each of these students and many others are harnessing the power of law to serve as an instrument of change. Now, of course, you can do this in any number of ways, and you will, for this is a terrifically accomplished and diverse class. 1 in 3 among you is a minority student. You represent almost every state and more than 50 countries. 15% of you have already achieved advanced degrees. Not only are you scholars, you are also soldiers, cancer survivors, artists, rock stars, religious leaders, entertainers, bankers, novelists, journalists, and public servants. No basketball players? And now you are entering an uncertain world, one burdened by economic recession, but showing signs of recovery. You are taking leave of this campus in an unprecedented age of challenge, an era of new threats, and a time of war. Yet you must resist the temptation to feel as though you have been dealt a bad hand. You have not been dealt a bad hand. You have been given a rare opportunity. Consider the many examples throughout history of people your age with exactly your training who have improved the course of our country and strengthened the structures and rules that govern our society. And then consider how many of those leaders were trained in the law, quite a few. I expect no less of each of you, whether you are heading to one of the 30 different states or to one of the dozens of countries represented by your post-grad jobs. Already you have secured impressive government and public interest positions. Record numbers of you are pursuing clerkships. You will soon begin fellowships at nonprofits and NGOs that are in desperate need of your counsel. You will provide legal services to indigent populations, and you will, despite these hard times, be entering the world's top law firms. Whatever your path, by any measure, you are already successful. But as much as you care about your own future success, and you should, for you have worked hard for it, I urge each of you to look for ways to serve others and to strengthen both our justice system and our commitment to the rule of law. Not only do you have the ability, you now have the credibility, and you also have the responsibility, a Columbia responsibility. Of course, you may be told many times over the next few years to wait. You may be told that your vision for a better system needs ripening, or worse, a reality check. But I say, trust your instincts. Believe in yourselves. Follow your own course. Unless, of course, you're one of the 2 graduates who are coming to work at the Department of Justice, where you'll be taking orders from me. Never question me. Whether you eventually lead movements, rule from the bench, return to the classroom, run for office, advise clients, or defend the accused, you are now ready to define our future. You are no longer just students of the law, you are now stewards of our nation's justice system. I believe the privilege of earning a Columbia law degree brings with it an ongoing responsibility to use your gifts and training to improve this system. And I hope I can count on each of you to be partners in the pursuit and administration of justice, however you decide to serve. You may choose to offer input into how our nation is going to combat crime, protect our national security, strengthen our education system, safeguard the environment, or ensure that all Americans have the opportunity to realize their dreams and fulfill their potential. But you can all go forward from this place and from this moment and give meaning to the ideals that animate our laws. You can also influence these laws in ways that call our country to aim higher, to become better, and to do more for the most vulnerable among us. But before you do, I encourage you to look back, to think about the most exciting vision you've had for improving our laws and our society during your time here. Perhaps it's something that you're working toward right now, or maybe it's something that you've never shared. Well, today, write it down, imprint it on your brain. Talk about it with one of your family members who has supported you, or one of your friends you've come to rely on, or one of the professors that you'll never forget. Then keep this goal before you. At crossroads throughout your career and your life, ask yourself, have I done it yet? And just as so many other Columbia Law School graduates have, keep asking this question, even when your hair has turned gray, even after your afro is long gone. Keep asking until your answer is yes. This afternoon, as we celebrate all that you've achieved, I am eager to see where each of you will lead our nation and our world. But wherever it is, know this, we are counting on you. I am counting on you. Your nation is counting on you. And starting now, history is counting on you. Good luck and congratulations. I am proud of you all.